some may be surprised to know that Syracuse led all schools with 7 players on the Inside Lacrosse preseason media All-American list released today. Defenseman Nick Mellon is the only first-teamer, but there's middies Chase Scanlon, Brendan Curry, along with goalie Drake Porter on the second team. Defensive midfielders Brett Kennedy and Peter Dirth check in on the third. For more on the Orange and the ACC, over to Travis.
So we now bring in our analyst, Evan Washburn, and he's going to give us ACC rankings here, but I want to start with that Syracuse team because the perception in the preseason seems to be like they've got all these talented players, but in the preseason media poll, or preseason Inside Lacrosse poll, they're not too high. And in some of the ACC rankings we've seen, they're at like 4th, and it doesn't make sense to me. Where would you put them?
Well, in terms of rankings in the ACC, I have them at number 2, right behind UVA. I'm a big fan, and look, I'm the first one to try and jump on whatever bandwagons maybe fighting Cuse, because you guys get loud as a fan base when you feel like you've got a ray of hope or something to cheer for. But I'm a total believer in the fact that this year feels like a bounce back and a year of return, if you will, for the Orange. And I just love the depth of talent, and I love that defensively, I think, is really where their identity is going to be built, despite the fact that traditionally it's known as a program that's built on offense, and they have a ton of offensive talent. And Chase Scanlon is a guy that comes in and can maybe be that alpha on the offensive side. The return of Tucker Dordevic from injury is big, but I just love what they have in net with Drake Porter and then a lockdown defenseman in Nick Mellon.
Yeah, in Syracuse, in terms of depth, I don't think people realized until you went through the list of trying to put together an All-American list, just how much depth they do have when you look at attack, midfield, and then the short stick, long stick positions, and then goalie. It just is spread out more so than Virginia, who's well represented. But I think people are surprised when you see you've got Matt Moore at attack, I think it was the 3rd team, and obviously Dox Aitken. But otherwise, they're kind of a smattering of Virginia guys around, but it seems like it's a consistent team. What do you make of Virginia as they come back from obviously the magical run and the expectations are there, but maybe people aren't feeling as high of them when you look at Penn State getting some #1 recognition too nationally?
Yeah, it's always tough to sort through when you look at the preseason polls, which I think are important and a valuable tool for fans to kind of have a baseline of things, and equally so, but probably more of a mystery in terms of these preseason All-American lists. And I know obviously Syracuse well represented on that list, and maybe UVA to a degree, and then Penn State obviously is part of this as well. I look at UVA's situation as one where they might not have, how do you say, the depth of high-end talent that Syracuse has, but I'd rather have their A-listers than Syracuse's A-listers, and I'd say the same thing for Penn State. So I think it's one of those, pick your poison. I'd rather have a few guys that are of the elite level than 5 or 6. And this is my question mark, Travis, with Syracuse, and that's why I brought up a guy like Chase Scanlon. He's being perceived as the #1 and the top talent that Syracuse is going to ride here in what feels like a big year, but he's yet to prove that. He had a great year, but he had Pat Spencer to give him a shadow to work under, and now he's going to have the spotlight on him. Those other programs, whether it's Amen or Aiken, they have players that have proven that they are happy and comfortable carrying teams at times. And Syracuse, at least to this point, doesn't have that. What they do have is, again, depth throughout. And I hate to say it, but maybe second-tier top level players that maybe have a chance to make a jump this season.
That's fair. And let's go to a program that has proven it with guys that have gone to championship weekend the last couple of years in Duke. Where do they fall?
Number 3 for me. And look, Duke and Notre Dame to me are somewhat interchangeable. And Duke to me has as much question as anybody, probably other than UNC in the ACC. Nakai Montgomery obviously is there offensively, and then you have JT Giles Harris. And then after that, I'll be honest with you, Travis, this is me peeling through a face-off yearbook or looking back at old box scores in 2019 stat sheets to see where we stand and who's coming back for 2020, because it's a lot of guys that I think were discussed as top-tier recruits, and this is where my comfort level resides when it comes to Duke at 3, is that I trust, obviously, that they brought in talented players, because all the recruiting services that put in the work have said that, and then more importantly, in my opinion, is the coaching that they get once they're in Durham. So this is why Duke's able to reload what seems like every year and make it back to championship weekend.
Yeah, a bunch of guys who at times maybe are a role player asked to do a little bit more, and then you see kind of what guys step up in certain situations. Will be interesting to see. You brought up Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame's an interesting one. You put them at 4, but you lose really the whole coaching staff besides Corrigan, which is important when you look at what the defense has done in terms of a system. How do you feel about Notre Dame this year? Because to me, they are one of the big question marks in the ACC.
That's why I had him below Duke, because the coaching that's there to try and build that Duke team back up in terms of what they lost is not necessarily there for Notre Dame, or at least not proven in South Bend. You've got good coaches that have come in to replace really good coaches. Obviously, Jerry Byrne headlining that in terms of his moving to Harvard, and he's been the face and the identity really of a defense that's been a big reason why they've been to, what has it been, like 14 NCAA tournaments consistently. So I think Notre Dame can be, again, a tournament team, and probably will be, and maybe make a run here. They obviously have an A-lister, as we talked about earlier, in terms of proven commodities offensively in Costabile. But other than that, I think that it's going to be interesting to see how that staff evolves early in the season and what the players look like under their direction.
So let's get to Carolina. You put them in the basement of the ACC, which is better than most other places, but it's still the basement of the conference. What do they have to do to not be in the basement come the end of the year?
Yeah, it's like one of those Finnish basements growing up where the kid down the street's got like an air hockey table, the nice gaming system. And honestly, it's a great comp, because I think UNC has all the things, and this is probably something that's been discussed over the years. They have all the things necessary to be a top program, and they've proven that. They've won a national championship in recent years. But to me, the question mark is obvious, is Chris Gray. And I was shocked, to be honest with you, Travis, to see him as the first-team All-American. I believe that he deserves a ton of respect for what he did at Boston and what those numbers were. But I'm just not sure I see him translating to that degree. And they probably have to, right, for UNC to be competing consistently with Duke and Notre Dame, and maybe for some Syracuse, even though I have them a bit above the rest. But I think that's probably the main question mark. And then young goaltender that's proven to be consistent at times, and then some other talent on defense coming back off an injury.
Yeah, that's the question mark, because North Carolina, as we've seen in the ACC, sometimes it's a coin flip. They win 2 games, and all of a sudden they're 2-0 and they're atop, and things change so drastically, so fast in this conference. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And Evan, we always appreciate the time. Thank you.
You got it, man.